And now, here's your host of Shaping Success, Wes Tankersley.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to Shaping Success. I'm your host, Wes Tankersley. This is just a regular episode, not a Treasure Valley episode. We are talking to a great mental performance coach. His name is Gary Chupik. Glad I got that right because I would have butchered his name. But Gary, thanks for hanging out with us.
Yeah, it's just an honor to be here with you. And I don't know what the weather is like in Idaho, but here in Seattle, it is unusually beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It's hot here. As we were talking a little bit beforehand, I sell window coverings and I sell interior stuff and I sell exterior stuff. So we've been outside on an exterior install all day, which has been a little bit of fun. I'm starting to get nice and warm here. So Gary, tell us a little bit about yourself. You reached out to me to see if we could do an interview, and when I looked through it, like the mental performance coach, the mindset thing is something that is very near and dear to me because I think that many people get these blocks and they are afraid to take this step forward, whether it be in business or in life or anything like that, relationships, those types of things, and they're afraid to make that leap, if you will. Tell us why you do what you do and kind of how you got into it.
Well, it's actually interesting you mention it or say it that way because to me, I feel like I've been a reluctant leader for most of my life. So I've always kind of like, you'd almost have to drag me into positions of leadership, but I found myself always in positions of leadership. So, but I don't crave the limelight. I don't crave the stage. I don't have to be the tip of the spear when it comes to leading a business. But I always found that I was always placed in those positions of leadership, especially when I was younger. And I think that's one of the real benefits that we can learn from just our experiences is we probably were put in positions of leadership when we were really young. And it's just sort of a note to self when we coach other people, or let's say we're coaching a sport or we're in our community and there's young people around, just to be able to put them in positions of leadership. And that's how it happened for me. So as I grew up, throughout the years being in Canada and then moving here to Seattle about 33 years ago, it was the same story. It was the story of my life being put in a position of leadership once again. And me saying, I don't know if I can do that. I'm just not sure if I have what it takes. And I think with any fear that we have, just about with anything, it always comes back and funnels back down to one thing, which is exposure therapy. It's like, can we expose ourselves to the thing that we're afraid of? And when it comes to entrepreneurship and owning a business, sometimes just doing it is the very best remedy for the tension that we experience or feel.
Yeah. And I feel like that's something that, there's a lot of things. Like I've worn lots of different hats. Obviously I sell window coverings now, but I was a teacher, I was a coach, I changed tires for 11 years. Like I've done all these different things. And really what it comes down to is just being able to do the work. I feel like you could be a teacher, and I'm sorry to the teachers out there. I have 2 degrees. I have a master's degree in education as well as a bachelor's. I feel like I could have gotten that by doing the job. Like I could have got better experience by actually doing it than just sitting there reading books and trying to figure out, not saying that those weren't good things, but doing the process is what really gets you into it. Like you become a better teacher or coach by teaching and coaching, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I think we have a weird relationship with the word no. Like someone might say, yeah, I already know that. But do you really? Like, do you really know? And I don't think there's any there's any substitute for experiencing something. So when you experience something, then you feel like, you can really know something. But just learning it intellectually, I call it Oprah Winfreyism. Like if we talk about it enough, we'll actually do something about, a societal issue. But it's really not true. It's like you do have to get your hands dirty. And I think we have a weird relationship with the word student as well, because when we think of student, we think of like, well, just taking tests and sitting in a classroom. But a student is more like an apprentice. And somehow in our day and age, we've gotten away from teaching apprenticeship to students, and we've just substituted like formal head knowledge for the same thing.
Yeah, and that's the thing about the formal education, right? Is like you sit there and you just like, I feel like just sitting there saying, hey, read this book, you're going to get it, you're going to figure it out. And that's what we do. I'm way more drawn from like writing the paper or whatever they've asked you to do from my personal experiences to help me be able to complete that task. And I mean, honestly, it's kind of funny. My master's degree, like they had lots of reading material, and I had to write probably 30 or 40 papers, but I never really cracked the book other than to skim for a little bit of information to put in there so that they saw that I drew the information from there. It's kind of a weird deal.
And I think that's why mentoring and coaching is so important, because when you are the mentoree or the coachee, the mentor gives you experiences for you to be able to do things. And so you just sort of have to get your hands dirty and do it. I'm the same way. I have a master's degree as well, but there's nothing like doing something because there's so many nuances. There's so many different ways of approaching things. And not to mention your mindset with all of that stuff. It's like, do you believe that if you learn something or you put in the work that you can be as good as you want to be? Well, that's an important part of it. Like your self-belief in whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's a business or not entrepreneurship or being an elite athlete, is all crucial, because if you don't believe that you can do something, you probably won't be able to do it. I know that some of my interactions with the Seattle Mariners, the very first thing they teach is self-belief. So if we teach you the fundamentals of baseball, do you believe that you can be as good as you want to be? And the athlete will have to fill in the blank for whatever it is that they want. Some of them want that second contract. Some of them just want to make the big leagues. Some of them want to be a Hall of Famer or an All-Star. So you really do need to be able to put in the work. But before that, the precursor is the do you believe that? And it's interesting. Things happen twice. Once in your mind and once in real life. And I think sometimes when we go from job to job, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that sometimes we have a really hard time seeing in our mind's eye us doing that thing or making that transition. But the more that we contemplate it, we use that mental imagery or visualization, the more that we can believe in ourselves that we can do something. And so actually acting out on that belief, we kind of feel like we've already been there in our mind a few times. And so it just makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think about, as I draw from my own experiences, it's like I think about failure, and you're talking about baseball, and baseball is one of the ones that I always get into because I think it's awesome because you fail, right? Part of the game is failure. You think about how many times the guy's up there, and it used to be a good batting average was 300, now it's like 250, but 250 means I hit the ball a quarter of the time. Like I wasn't that successful, but being able to change the mindset that when I fail, I'm able to go back out there and try again, no matter what it is, like starting a business, maybe I didn't get as much sales as I needed to this month or whatever, but going back out there and knowing the next day that you're going to do everything you possibly can to get that next sale, to work towards that goal. And I think a lot of people just they bask in I had a friend on last week, Brad Dalton, talking about pity city is what he called it. And how long do you sit in pity city? Doesn't mean that you don't go there, but you have to find the way out of there. And a lot of that has to do with mindset.
It really does. It's interesting that when it comes to failure, I call it reframing failure. Your ability as a leader to reframe either it's your failure or somebody else's failure or a team failure, that's just crucial. Or even a business where you have multiple employees. It's just crucial, your ability to reframe what just happened. And I like to think of it like driving a car. It's like when you look through the front windshield, you're very future focused. You can ask good questions about the past, but you're future focused. But what you don't want to do is gaze through the rearview mirror, because now you're always going to be thinking about like what went wrong, what happened. When in reality, we know pretty quickly what went wrong. We just can't stay there. We can glance at the side view mirrors about where we were or where we presently are, pardon me. But just looking at the rearview mirror is just a glance, and it's not much more than that. We really do need to focus on the windshield.
Yeah, and I think that that's the thing that stops a lot of people is the fact that if they get in that, that mindset that it's not possible, if they fail one time trying to do it and they don't get that instant gratification that it's over, right? We have to be willing to be able to fail over and over again. I like to use the term fail forward because I really think that that's what it is. You fail and then you think about all the things that you did, just like you said, reframe it, figure out what you can do to change it, and then be successful the next time. But I think the big thing that winners do that are a little bit different than the people who don't succeed is that they continue to set another goal on top of that. They just keep moving forward. Even when they reach that milestone that they're looking for, they just keep searching for the next one to keep moving.
Yeah, it kind of depends on people's definition of success, doesn't it? Like if success is winning the ultimate, award or cup or trophy, then yeah, good luck with that, because that's very difficult to do in almost any sport.
Right.
But yet in business, what does success look like? Success might be just doing 10% better than you did last year,
Hmm.
and 10% better the next year after that, and figuring some things out. So we're so afraid of the rejection that might come, whether it's from other people or ourselves. But really, it's just a redirection, when we don't accomplish our goals, or when we don't do something that we set out to do. So if we can just redirect our energy to making progress, I say nothing feels better than progress. As long as you feel like you're heading in the right direction, you can be optimistic about the future. But if you feel like you're going backwards, that's when you need to put out the fires and make a change in your business.
Yeah. Try and figure out what the actual problem is if it's not going forward. You mentioned that you work with a lot of elite athletes. How do they, deal with that scenario? Like I'm thinking about like there's guys like I don't know. I'm a Giants fan, so I'm going to tell you, Willie Adames got signed by the Giants last year. He's started out pretty slow, but you just watch that. It's like what are people's like that mentality that like if I'm slow and I don't get it, what am I going to do? Like how do they work through that?
Yeah, you just have to have a short memory. In any sport, that's just what you have, and quite frankly, it's like that in business too. You just have a short memory with stuff. So I think it's the difference between being self conscious and task conscious. Sometimes we're in our own thoughts too much. Too much, we're in our own heads. But to try and force those thoughts outside of us can be really healthy. And so for players who are maybe starting off slow or in the slump, or maybe you're in business and you're really struggling with something, as long as you can keep your thoughts outside of yourself and being task conscious, that way you can go into neutral thinking. So neutral thinking is it's almost like a form of judgment that, like, because we'll judge ourselves really hard about things, right? Like we're
Right.
really hard on ourselves. But just to be neutral about everything, like you don't have to judge everything, because quite frankly, there's something called decision fatigue. And I think in the same way, there's judgment fatigue. Like you're always judging something. You're constantly putting effort into, whether you liked your meal, or whether you liked the TV show, or whether, you did a good enough job washing your car, and, or someone else's stuff. Like it just gets so exhausting. But to adopt a neutral mindset where you're not really viewing things as positive or negative, you're just very task conscious. And it's actually quite relieving of all the pressure that someone feels, because carrying around that weight with you is not healthy for you as an athlete, and certainly not healthy for you as a business owner.
Yeah. How many people do you get around that you have to kind of talk out of that? Because I feel like that's one of the things is like you were talking about, we're our biggest bully. So we can sit here and say, you know, my hair is too gray, my nose is too big. I'm looking at myself as I'm trying to figure out some of the things that I might judge myself for. But like we really judge ourselves based on what we think on perspective. What do you do to get someone out of that slump?
Yeah, it really is. Going into neutral thinking is a big thing. And then and being task conscious. But the other piece is just like learning to accept your strengths. I know it sounds really strange, but let's say, for an example, an elite athlete, well, they're there because of their strengths. That's why they are playing the sport. They're not there because of their weaknesses. They're there because of their strengths. Like, for example, I was working with a Canadian hockey player who was just sort of relegated to the fourth line, and he was much better than just playing on the fourth line, but he just needed that wake up call. And so I said, well, what's your greatest strength? And he said, I think it's my speed. And I said, well, are you the fastest guy on the ice? And he said, well, I don't think so right now. And I said, well, why not? And he goes, well, there's other parts of my game that I'm trying to work on. I was like, no, no, not at all. Like, you really need to go back to your best attribute, which is your speed, and then let your instincts take over. And so working with him for, about 4 weeks, he was able to go from the fourth line to the first line, and then being the top scorer on his team in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And it was a matter of reminding him what his strength was, and to like double down on that strength. And yeah, you can always, work on your weaknesses, but you're going to spend a lot of time working on your weaknesses. But if you just tap into your strengths, that's probably your best attribute. And then lean on other people as a business owner, lean on other people to do some of the other stuff. And there are times where you do need to, bring up your weakest attribute or that kind of thing. But really, it's about leaning on your strengths and then just being patient in the midst of that.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point because working like in different businesses, you know, from what I've done, like teaching and all the things that I've done, you always find that like you get to that point where you have something that you're really good at. And I'm finding this as a business owner. Like I'm good at the marketing, I'm good at interviewing people, I'm good at kind of being the face of the company, I'm good at interior sales, I'm good at these things. And then my partner who I work with, you know, he owns half the business. He's good at exterior sales, he's good at installing, he's good at these things. And so we both kind of lean on each other and we expect each other to do that. And then we have an office gal who she's good at, you know, the customer service and those types of things. So it really is what it is. I think the biggest thing that I ever found in business is that sometimes the person who is in charge doesn't know how to delegate, doesn't know how to pick those people. They want to do it all, and then they have a really hard time allowing other people to help them be successful. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, the alignment's the most important piece. I mean, it's not just trying harder or doubling down on your attributes. But if you don't have the right people in place, it's almost impossible to be successful. Being a hockey fan, I remember the 2013, 2012 Boston Bruins. They didn't have a score in the top 20 in the league, not one. But you didn't need a superstar. You just needed to play together with everybody in the right position. And I think we underestimate the power of having people in the right position.
Right. Yeah, and just like the hockey player that you were talking about, once he figured out what it was like, hey, you know, I'm fast, and then you focus on that one thing. And I think the biggest thing too with business people is like when as a salesman, when I was in the other company, it's like you're always trying to compare yourself to everyone else. And when you can get past that comparison to other people and just work on what you're good at, that's when I really flourished, like that neutral point that you were making. It's like once you get to the point where it's like, it's not good, it's not bad, I'm just going to keep moving forward, the success rate has to go up. I mean, I feel that that's kind of the way it goes.
Yeah, well, think about an athlete. Like what we want them to do is something called CAPE, CAPE, and it works in business. I've taught it to the FBI, I've taught it to Microsoft, I've taught it to just all sorts of different people, and it's especially useful in baseball. Since we're talking about baseball,
Yeah.
it's called CAPE, CAPE. C stands for control yourself. So take that universal sigh to relax, which is a deep sigh, right?
Yeah.
You're just going to take a deep breath and then compose yourself. A is assess the situation. And in baseball, a pitcher is going to assess the situation very quickly. Typically, there's between 13 and 18 seconds between pitches in baseball. So you're going to assess the situation. Then P is to know what you need to do in that next pitch. And then E is execute. And execute stands for trust your plan, trust your training, and most importantly, trust your instincts. And when an athlete plays instinctually and they already know their plan, they already know their training, and they play instinctually, that's when they're at their very best. And when you think about it in business, well, when are we at our very best? When we are operating instinctually. So if sales are your thing and that's where you find most of your instincts kicking in pretty easily, then that's a good indication that that's a good fit for you.
Yeah. And that's one of the challenges is always trying to figure that out. Right. And I think that you just being, you know, as an employer, being a good judge of it, and then yourself just trying to, you know, think about it, write it down, try and figure that out, try and exercise the fact that you have to figure out what you're good at, and then you have to just kind of do it over and over again. Like Malcolm Gladwell talks about in 10,000 hours. It's like, just do the work. You're not going to be proficient at something until you do the work.
Yeah, and fair enough. I mean, when you're younger, you just sort of try a bunch of stuff.
Right.
Like you'll hear people say you got to pick a lane and you got to go toward that as quickly as possible. Yeah, there's some truth to that, but sometimes it's a little bit of a journey to figure out what your strengths are and what your identity is and what you're good at. And so I'm not so opposed to trying a bunch of different things. I think that's actually pretty healthy. Just like a young athlete is playing multiple sports. I remember Sam Bradford, you know, MVP of the NFL, and he played like 4 different sports. And then he went, you know, narrowed it down to 3. But even in high school, he played 2 or 3 different sports. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But eventually, you got to come to a place where you're willing to close some doors so that you can excel at a few others.
And it's an interesting point there, because I remember when I was in high school, which is quite a few years ago, we all played 3 sports. You know, like every season was a season, and we played those sports. And now we're getting into this, and I'm interested to hear what you see mindset wise with these kids, because like baseball becomes the only thing. football becomes the only thing, basketball becomes the only thing, and now they're travel ball, summer league, winter league. You know, what is the mindset like and the mentality with these kids when they're? I feel like if it was me, I would have been way overloaded with one sport. Like I thought the idea of being able to play multiple sports was something that gave me a break from the one that I was good at. You know, it's like, hey, go do this and it'll help me with my footwork. It's like football's over, basketball's a great one to go do footwork and hand-eye coordination, and then baseball, same kind of thing. It's like it's always a change, but there's a lot of people specializing now. How does that look for you?
Yeah, I don't think that's a positive direction or a positive movement, in my opinion, because, like as you said earlier, if you're playing three sports, you're kind of finding out what you're good at and what you're not good at, but they're also complementing each other in some unique ways, like your footwork. And I think right now, what I see in the sports world for young adults is that there's so much pressure to succeed at that one sport, because if I don't succeed at that, then I've got nothing to fall back on. Whereas I think if you have multiple sports that you're involved in, you're learning skills, and you're learning about the intellectual part of that sport, the physical part of that sport, the emotional part of that sport. But if all you're doing is motocross, if all you're doing is golf, if all you're doing is tennis, if all you're doing is football, it's just, there's so much more pressure on the kids. And I hear this all the time. Like I don't coach young adults or even adolescents very often, but from time to time I'll work with a friend of mine's son or daughter. But the pressure that those parents put on those kids to succeed at the one sport, and I hear them say something like this: well, why am I working so hard to help you succeed at this one thing if your head's not really in it, or if you're really, like, you got to decide if you want it. I'm like, they're 14,
Yeah.
they're 15. How can they decide at 15 if they really want? They're just doing the best they can with what they know in the moment. And so I think just sort of taking a lighter approach is a far better approach, because I see so many adolescents just melting under the pressure.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was talking with my business partner today about like kids, because he has a child on the way. He's supposed to be here, in the next couple weeks or whatever. And we were talking about how he was thinking about how, and my parents were the same way. They were 18 years old when they had us. And if you think that, I think about 18-year-old me trying to make a decision for myself. There's no way that I could have made that decision, And then my mom's 19 when she has my brother. Like, this is insane. Like, there is no way that a 14-year-old can make a decision like that, especially with all the things that are going on, and hormonal changes, puberty, all that stuff. It's just like, I don't know. It's amazing to think that a parent's going to say, hey, you're going to do this and only this because I'm paying for it.
Yeah, yeah, and granted, I mean, there's a lot of pressure on everyone, and it's not just the kid, right? It's the parents as well. But the kids carry the pressure, like they carry the weight and the pressure from their mother and father, and some kids can handle it quite well, and others, they barely even know how to, like, comprehend or even sort of like computize just what thoughts that they're having about letting their parents down. So, I wish parents would lighten up a bit, but this is the day and age we live in, where you're right, people are, you know, taking weekends and 4-day weekends to be with their kids and drive their kids around. And I know some parents that drive around, literally live in an RV, taking their kids from event to, I literally know this, event to event. And it's just a hard pill to swallow for me as a mental performance coach, because I think, man, like, your kid, there's a shelf life to this sports thing, and you can shift into coaching and, consulting or whatever it is that you want to do with that sport. But I just, learning the other skills in life to be able to handle life and handle its ups and downs is just so important. So yeah, I kind of have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with sports at that age, and how much pressure that we put on kids.
Well, and it's tough too, because you think about it, like I got a scholarship to play at a small NAIA school to play football, right? The amount of people who get scholarships, like I was one of two students in my high school class, graduating class of like 200. It was a smaller school by today's standards, but two people out of that whole class got scholarships. And you think about that when you are sitting there as a parent trying to tell your kid to get really good at sports and understand the fact that the chances of them like going pro, going to college even, is very, very small. So to put all your eggs in that basket, it's just amazing to me the amount of time that they're spending doing these things, like living in an RV. That's insane. Let your kid be a kid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and let them learn all the lessons that sports has to teach them. Like, for example, in my view, I don't know, and I've thought about this a lot, and maybe you can correct me and let me know what you think, but I don't know of another institution kids how to be leaders like sports does. It teaches them resilience. It teaches them, how to rebound for reframe failure. Be a leader. I just don't know of anything. I don't think it's the educational system. I'm a religious guy, but I don't think it's the type of leaders that sports does. And so I'm kind of all in on this sports thing because of the benefit that it teaches young people.
Yeah, it's one of those things for me. It's like being on time, being like all the things that I learned from that I do in my everyday life. A lot of them are from sports. Talking to my coach, you're not 15 minutes early, you're 10 minutes late. Those types of things. Ready to go, strap it on, go out there, do it. Like it teaches you all those things that allow you to be able to have the opportunity to be a leader. And you're not really like if you're sitting in a classroom, who's the leader in the math class? The guy who's got the best grades? I don't know. I mean, it's just not there. You get the social interaction because you're around kids, but most of the time you're just sitting there listening to someone talk and then you're doing the work. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, and I think I can't remember the exact statistics, so forgive me, but it's something like 87% of all CEOs and C-suite leaders in businesses either played high school or college sports, which is an amazing statistic. And I think it's like 91% for females. It's like amazing. So I think there's something about sports that prepares young adults for leadership in ways that other things can't.
Yeah, and like you said, that's the transition from business to sports. It's like you're a leader on the field. You're going to be a leader, not necessarily, but it gives you a better opportunity to be a leader in business too.
Yeah, I mean, think about all the things it takes to be an elite athlete. I mean, we could sit here and name, 25 different things it takes to be an elite athlete. But I bet that 95% of those attributes could cross over to business. Does your self-talk matter when you own your own business?
Oh
Oh
yeah.
yeah, nobody talks more to you than you do. What about your emotional regulation when you're dealing with difficult situations? Does that have anything to do with business? It sure does. What about your ability to visualize something or use your mental imagery to reframe failure? There's just so many. There's so many attributes that cross over to business, and I think sports prepares us for that.
Yeah, and I think just like you were talking about getting neutral, having that short memory about the failures and the successes, because just because you were successful doesn't mean that you're not going to fail again. And being able to get back to neutral as fast as possible is a great way to look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and you think about it too, like a professional athlete, some of the athletes that I work with, they want to evaluate their performance after a game, which is like the worst time to do it, whether you've won or you've lost. The best time to approach that or kind of get into learning mode is probably like a Monday morning or Monday afternoon. Like give it a little bit of time, postpone your feelings about what you're experiencing in that moment. But the idea behind evaluation is for you to get better. And evaluating your performance after a loss or let's say after you lost a bid or something discouraging happened to you in business, it's just really not the best time to learn from those experiences. So I think we would do well to postpone our feelings so that we can deal with them at a later time in a better way.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that a lot of times you like when you're mad, right? Like my wife doesn't want to go to bed mad, but the best thing for me to do is go to bed mad so that I can think about it in the morning or get through it, right? So that I don't say something that I regret. Because in the moment you say stuff that just comes out, right? Like you don't think about it. You're not thinking it through.
Yeah, and it's the same thing in business. When if you have a business partner or an employee and they've done something to hack you off, like the worst time to say something is in that moment. It's better to look for patterns, rather than address individual things. And so, at least for me, as an employer, and I've hired and fired many people, but what I'm really looking for is patterns. So that way, if I go to talk to an employee, I can say, hey, I noticed a pattern here, and you can identify the pattern. But if you're just going to nitpick at a one-off, like it's not worth it.
Yep. Well, Gary, it's been great having you on here. Great conversation. Tell us a little bit about your company, how people can reach out to you and get in touch with you if they're looking for some coaching. Mindset is a great, for me, it's just one of those things that you want to learn to have that that move forward mindset. I can't remember what it is right now, but it is a growth mindset is something that I really try to have every single day to be better, to learn something and keep moving forward. How are you helping people do that, and where can they connect with you?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. 50% of my business right now is in sports and 50% in business. And so if people want to learn how to have that sort of victorious championship kind of mindset, then I'm available, and people can reach out to me on Instagram. That's kind of probably where I live the most because most of my clients are there. And so Elite Mindset on Instagram, I'm the one with the blue verification dot. And then on LinkedIn, people can find me there. People can just Google my name, but for the most part, I can pretty much be found anywhere. But I basically have two programs. One of them is called Elite Mindset, which is a mental performance process that I take athletes through and business people through, how to think like a high performer. And then something called the Game Plan for Life, which is how to live a high performance lifestyle. So I think you can take that same mentality in your mindset in your sport or in business and apply it to your life. And I think a lot of athletes kind of don't know what to do after sports. And so I want to give them a way to think about life that is still in a high performing kind of way.
Yeah, and that's amazing because you would think that they would kind of carry over and keep moving in a direction of trying to find another place of leadership and being able to be in charge of something, and they would kind of learn some of those things. So, but I could see the same thing. It's like, this is my identity. I'm done. What do I do?
Yeah, and it's very common, unfortunately.
Yep. Well, thanks again, Gary. Really appreciate it. And I will make sure that we share this out to everyone. Go ahead and give Gary a follow. And until next time, I challenge you to find the shape of your success.